Wholeness and welcome. This is Josh Dippold of integratingpresence.com. Today I have Christian Della Huerta with me, right? We talked a little bit before about my pronunciation sometimes. Christian, how's it going?
I'm doing pretty well, Josh. I'm glad we're having this conversation.
So Christian reached out to me initially, and I turned him down for speaking initially, and then he came back with this question of that well, actually, I'm sorry. Let's get it. We'll get into that in a little bit. But first off, what I do with these standardly is instead of reading a printed introduction, I toss it back to Christopher, and this will be the first time me getting to talk to him too. Just jump right in it. What do you do? Who are you, and what do you do? So introduce yourself if you'd like. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I've
Mhm.
been doing personal transformation work, um, and with groups as well, with corporations, focused on relationships, on personal empowerment, on women's empowerment, on life purpose, for over 30 years. It's been a long time. I'm a TEDx speaker. I've got a couple of books out. The most recent one is called Awakening the Soul of Power, which talks about how we step into power, personal power, in a way that's not about hierarchy, domination, fear, force, control, different way. That is more of a match with who we are authentically. I lost your sound all of a sudden.
That's because I'm muted. So, so, so what else? I'm trying to think. Well, we'll just jump into it here. You sound kind of like me that don't want to talk too much about yourself, or rather talk about kind of the meat and potatoes here of the kind of the work. So Christian reached out to me and wanted to know about presence. Well, I had these fancy buzzwords on my site, right, about integrating presence and embodying heart-centered wisdom. And even though they are fancy buzzwords, kind of dig into what that actually means. I don't use those for no purpose whatsoever. Um, these and Christian said, if I'm remembering right, you said, well, I have those qualities. It's what makes me a good coach, but I struggle with teaching them in a systematic way and even speaking about them. Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
could
Yeah,
you
because
could you tell me some more about that? And yeah,
well, it's one of the skills that I think make a good coach is that ability to be fully present. When I'm with somebody or even in front of a group, I'm there 100% myself. And I have apprentices that I teach how to facilitate breath work, how to how to help other people, and sometimes I just fall short of words about how to explain what it is that I do. Like I'll say something like, right, when I'm there with a client or in front of a group, I don't care what's happening with your life. I don't care what's happening with your boyfriend or girlfriend or what financially what's going on in the world. When you're there with a client, all that gets put into a drawer. You can pick it up in an hour or 3 hours, and it'll be there. Um, and yet, I figured that there have to be better ways to teach presence. And yeah, I know how to take people in guided, processes to go deeper and deeper within themselves, and I do that well. But what I think I'm lacking is the language. Like, how do you teach presence?
yeah, it's a really good question, and it's well, first off, I think it would be good to talk about this integrating presence. So one of the reasons I chose to do it with an ing is it's an ongoing process, right? It's not something that's just been established and then we've got it down and then we can just go back to Netflix. It's an ongoing process. It doesn't seem to end. And yeah, you seem to embody this quite well. We kind of know when someone's fully attentive, fully there or not, right?
Yes.
If they're just, somewhere else, mentally, emotionally, not physically, because that's the one thing where everybody's really present, at least somewhat, until they go away. But yeah, it is a really good question. And so I came up more in the Buddhist the Buddhist training and practice and study. So that's primarily where I can talk from, even though I really don't consider myself technically a Buddhist. I think one place to start perhaps would be just this notion of past and future, right? The past being something that is not possible to go back and change. You know, these obvious things that we know cognitively, but it's good to state them anyway, I feel. And then if we get too caught in the past, a lot of times it can bring on, sadness, depending on how what we're ruminating on or reflecting on in the past and how we're doing that. And then anxiety in the future. If the future is uncertain, it hasn't got here yet, and we don't know for sure what the future will bring. And even when we're reflecting, or even when we are caught in the past and future, right, it is just a thought in the now. So when I am thinking I'm living in the past, it's actually just a thought or a memory in the now. Those, in the same way with the future, right? When we're planning or seeing things in the future, it's actually a thought right here and now.
Yeah, exactly. Which is where the human mind goes to 99% of the time. We're either rehashing, stuck in a past that is gone and will never come to be again, or projecting into fantasizing about, hallucinating about a future that may or may not come to be. And you're absolutely right. Is when we're futurizing, that's where anxiety happens. When we're kind of scare ourselves about what may or may not happen. And I think, when we're stuck in the past and we're ruminating and rehashing all that past, that's where grief and regret and guilt live. And none of it is real. The only thing we know is real is this moment. The only thing we know that is not a figment of our imagination or memory or
Yes.
fantasy.
Yes, yeah, and it's also important too at the same time not to completely write it off, the past and the future either, and to condemn
Exactly.
ourselves for being lost in that, because it is really important to have retrospection, right? That to the wisdom of retrospection, to reflect on our lives, how it's gone, because and there's certain things that have happened to us, certain things we've done in our past that we don't want to repeat again. So from time to time, it's very helpful to reflect, especially even on our day briefly, and see the importance of it, but also know that's exactly what it is. It's a thinking or a remembering process, a reflection process, a contemplation process, not necessarily a reality. And same way with
Yeah,
the
exactly.
future. I have a tendency not to plan enough sometimes, and now here I am in Europe, and I've got a bunch of things to plan for 3 months. Not having a home or anything like this, so I'm making all these different arrangements and plannings that I don't normally do. So it's interesting to see my kind of presence and mindfulness when I have to do these plannings, right? To live day by day, or month by, or however, whatever time scale we want to give to it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It doesn't mean that we're denying a past and all our wisdom and experience and connections and history with our loved ones. Of course not. Uh, Nobody's going to take that away from us. But it's when we're stuck, when our mind is stuck in the past, or again, it's a good thing to dream about our future and kind of taking steps and plans and breaking goals into smaller, manageable, more doable pieces. That's all great. So it's not saying don't do that. It's saying like there's a cost for when we're stuck in the past or fantasizing about the future. There's a cost that we pay. We're missing opportunities. If we're having a conversation, we're missing really important cues. That could be subtle. That could be the way that a person speaks, the words that they use, the words that they don't use, the pauses, the body language, the energetic exchange. That's all giving us invaluable information. And if we're stuck in our own heads, planning what we're going to say in response, then we're missing all that stuff. And even in terms of productivity at work, if we're worried about the future, or if we're or that meeting that we're going to have with our supervisor tomorrow morning, our productivity is being impacted negatively. So there are a lot of benefits. The quality of our relationships will definitely improve the more present that we become.
And as far as teaching this and speaking about this, it is just some people just aren't cut out to do it, right? I mean, I have a lot to learn about speaking as well because I stutter and stammer. I just have this drive to talk and share anyway. So that's a start, I would say. And there's three other ways I'd like to break it down is ethics, practice, and wisdom, and even needed a little bit of wisdom even to begin with to see the importance of this, right? And then with ethics and practice, I feel that that helps gain wisdom. And by wisdom, I mean not just something we read in a book, but lived experience to know how to apply knowledge and insights to how we think, speak, and act in the world that will lead towards our own happiness, the happiness of others, and for all beings everywhere potentially. So, and the ethics are just these basic things that are a practice in and of themselves. You know, this thing about not harming, right? Not harming. That's where it all starts for me because just imagine the world, something we usually take for granted, you know, imagine the world one day that nobody killed each other. No human took another human life. I think the whole world would, change overnight almost. And that's something we take for granted, but not everybody can say that, you know, in these things like not taking what's not offered, um, you know, refraining from sexual misconduct, whatever that one might mean. And then, you know, speaking truthfully, not deliberately telling falsehoods. These go a long way. Actually, it's not like a burden, and it's not thou shalt not for me. It's a training, right? It's a practice, and it's
Yeah,
for our own benefit.
I totally agree. I don't live by many rules,
Mhm.
but one of them that I do honor is do no harm, which has a lot of permutations depending on the real life situations.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I resonate with the way that you're speaking about ethics. And so, what's the connection between ethics and presence? What's that weaving that you're
Presence,
making?
yeah. So the more usually, at least from my experience, the more ethically, I mean, I wasn't always like this too, but when I started practicing, actually did more meditation practice first, and then these came second. When traditionally, you usually start with ethics first. I just noticed how my life got way better. I was less worried about things, about repercussions that would come back to me from acting kind of unskillfully, unwholesomely, right? And then skillful actions have skillful results. So, but this is a really good question too. It opened up more bandwidth to be in the moment too and be more present, right? There was a lot of things kind of get cleared, and we don't when we meet someone, they can kind of sense that we're not going to be a harm to them, and so that's a gift I can give someone else when they know that I'm not going to be of a harm to them, so they can relax, let their guard down, right, and maybe open up. And like this, so if everybody's kind of on my guard, or I'm trying to cover up lie after lie, or
Yes.
a white lie, then that takes a lot more effort and bandwidth in order to, unless it's the complete reversal where somebody has to really tune in to read the other person in order to manipulate them, right? So
Yeah.
discernment is always key as well, and that comes with the wisdom aspect too. But yes, you're going to say.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense because like that's one of the reasons that I don't lie, that I choose not to lie. And it doesn't mean that I have to say, whatever's in my mind to everybody that I'm speaking with. Of course, we retain choice about that, about what we say to whom, when. But it's like when we lie, it takes us out of being present because then we have to be remembering. It puts us into that more Machiavellian managerial. It's like, wait, what did I say to this one, and when did I say it, and it just pops us out
It
that
does. It takes
magic of just being present with someone else.
it takes so much extra energy and effort to keep track of all these little lies and
My
what
God.
someone said to someone, and oh my goodness, are they going to catch me in a lie? And then this, and then
Exactly.
then people will
Exhausting.
blow people. I know, it's just so easier just to not do that. It makes me
Exactly.
tired just thinking about all that stuff.
Me
Yeah.
too. And I've certainly done that, or when I was younger in my life. But I'm grateful that I realized that what we're just talking about. So much work. No, I'm not, and I'm not willing to do that.
Yeah, it's and these yeah. And so the next thing is kind of these practices. So um let's see, the practices of mindfulness. So traditionally it's called the four foundations of mindfulness. And I don't know how much I want to go into this because there's so much out there. There's so many better teachers than me, but basically it's training through meditation. It's fourfold. Basically, is the body, um, hedonic tone. I like to call it hedonic tone. Basically, every experience we have is either pleasant, unpleasant, or neither of those, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, which is very helpful for people who are come more from emotions, right? Um, Knowing that a lot of our action just comes from seeking the pleasant, wanting to get rid of the unpleasant, and then kind of zoning out or not having any interest when they're neither of those. Just having that training helps so much to be present too. Then there's the mind, and then there's the fourth one. That was the third one is just the mind, and the fourth one is like there's a lot of different names for it. Technically, it's dhammas, which is a list of five other lists, but we'll just say it's like different phenomena or contents of mind. Um, so we won't go into all these. Actually, I want to go back really briefly to about speech. And so the ethics around speech too, and we touched on some of them already, the not telling a falsehood, and at the right time you mentioned some timeliness because there's just certain times not to say things. The other ones that make sense are being kind, right? Saying don't not using harsh speech, so saying it kindly, saying it in a way that creates concord and unity instead of division. And then the other one is kind of frivolous speech. There's refraining from frivolous speech or idle chatter is one way to put it. Now, this is it's different. Like if we're in a situation and there's this like dead air silence, right? And people are getting uncomfortable. Well, of course, that's the time when I need to do small talk, right? Put the other person at ease. I don't really consider that, idle chatter. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I'm glad you include that because I don't do that well. I don't do chit chat well.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, it's not my comfort zone. Um, I've for better or for worse, I like to dive deep with somebody, and with little time we may have together, I want to get to know like the deepest of you that I can. You're like want to get down to essential
Yes. And
stuff as
th-
quickly as possible.
this is where I had to actually train in that because I mean I was getting it's like, oh, you just want to you just want to jump right into it, and yeah, I'm usually the same way. So it was because I saw the kind of pointlessness of it and such a waste of time. We
Mm-hmm.
have this precious life, and the time is the most valuable thing in the world to me. Can always make more
Exactly.
money but can't get our time back. So
And respectfully, of course, if we meet somebody, we're
sure,
not going to ask them right away about their most intimate
sure,
secrets or what they do in the bedroom. Of course not. That's not appropriate. But you can dive into essential conversation
sure.
and really get to know somebody quickly
Yes.
without getting into all that deeply personal stuff.
It is true, and for me, I was not as much interested in that is the kind of the deeper existential questions, and it's people are just kind of like turned off right away, right? Like, well, why are you here? Where did It's just like, yeah, so, or asking about their deepest beliefs and these type of things that are really intricate philosophical questions, right? Kind of hung that one up in college. That was the time for that one.
Yeah, yeah.
until it's the right and appropriate time. So yeah.
Right,
So
right.
going back to that and the meditation practice. Well, first, I instead of me just giving a lecture here, tell me about some of the practices you engage in. Do you have
I
daily
do.
practice, or do you recommend practices, or which ones have you found helpful? And
I'm a breathwork practitioner,
okay,
which is a whole other conversation. There's a lot of it's a large umbrella term. But there are a lot of breathing practices that to me are what I find most effective. And it kind of becomes second nature. And yeah, in the beginning, it's practice, and you're absolutely right that it is a journey of a lifetime. Like we don't ever let up on that, but it does become easier and it does become more second nature. And so, yeah, like even if you're stuck in traffic, um, and you start, getting upset because you're going to be late, which is futurizing. So in that moment, what I do is just calm down, like take a few deep breaths, and even that just begins to calm down the body. There's swamis in India that have that much control over their body that they can tell the heart to slow down, and the heart slows down. Some of them even mimicking states that are hard to distinguish from death. Most of us now are not gonna have that kind of mastery over the body, but anybody, any one of us can slow down the breath. That's just a matter of a choice and a little bit of a discipline. And what happens when we slow down the breath is that the heart has no choice. The heart has to slow down. So, and when the heart slows down, then the body begins to relax, the nervous system begins to quiet down, and we bring ourselves back to center, back to calmness. And so it's a simple practice, not easy in the heat of the moment, right? If you're about to engage in and get in and sucked into an argument, um, and there's a whole other conversation about what to do in those settings to prevent, reacting and then saying something that we're going to regret down the road. Um, because what you were talking about, it was less than kind. It was hurtful. It was accusatory. It was pointing the finger. It was blaming somebody else. And then what happens is that we just get caught in those power plays of you did this, no, you did that, you always do this, no, you well, never ends well. And so that's one of the ways in which mindfulness practices, like we're talking about, and even just focusing on the breath, will have a huge impact on the quality of our lives, on our health, because we're stuck in traffic, or get upset because somebody cut us off. They either two things happen: either they were completely clueless and didn't even know what they did, or they did it intentionally. Either way, they're fine, right? They're okay. It's our bio that's being released by our body, and that's starting to eat us up from the inside out. So we're the ones paying the price. So this is also a matter of health and well-being, not just inner peace. It has implications, onto, on our bodies and our relationships and all our lives.
It does. And I have mentioned this practice several times of taking the 3 breath highway, just being fully present for the entirety of 3 breaths has a huge difference. And that can be one's meditation practice, daily
That's it.
meditation practice. It doesn't take any more than that, at least to start off with. It can go up, from there. I found it very helpful. Now, one of the other things I wonder about this is challenging folks sometimes is just to turn towards the unpleasant, right? Now, whatever has happened to us, if somebody does cut us off in traffic or something like this, yeah, it doesn't make it right. At the same time, what would it be like just to pause for a moment and feel how unpleasant it feels in the body instead of immediately reacting to it? So with these practices, with mindfulness and anapanasati, it's a Pali word for mindfulness of it, breathing in and out. And there's a whole 16-step process. I think it's 16 steps, but won't go into that now. It's a systematic training with the breath too. It's very ancient practice, or very old practice, I should say. Um, but uh, but turning towards the unpleasantness and feeling that. So with a meditation practice, it opens up more space to have a choice where we see that we don't have to be immediately reactive. A lot of times, I know before I started training, it was just on autopilot to react to something that had happened.
Mm-hmm.
But with a practice, meditation practice or breathing practice, yeah, it gives that moment of, wait a second, I can choose something different here. Even if
That's it.
there's just that awareness and can keep choosing the same way we react to something, but more and more time opens up to respond instead of react, the
That's
choice
it.
to respond instead of react.
That's it.
And a lot of times when I pay attention to this, it's just because it feels so unpleasant in the body that I just want to release it immediately. And sometimes that comes through anger or a choice
Yeah.
that's not the best thing for me. If instead I just stick with it a little bit, and just feel how unpleasant it is. I mean, I don't have to like it, but just notice a lot of my actions in that way are come out of unpleasantness and not really knowing that it's unpleasantness and knowing how that works. So we can override that sometimes, especially if it's going to be in the longer term benefit instead of just an immediate relief or reaction that can actually just make things worse or not get anything better. Same way with pleasant things when we're seeking pleasant things, right? If we can see that space where, oh, I have a choice here instead of just latching on to maybe something again and again that seems pleasant in the moment, but maybe it might not be the best thing long term for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what those, whether it's one deep breath or three deep breaths, if we have the time, that's where that choice point comes in. That's what that practice does. It buys us a moment so that we can make a choice. And making the choice, as you're pointing us to, doesn't mean that we become a doormat. It's like we can choose to access all of our human emotions, including anger. Um, but the difference is doing it from a place of choice rather than reacting, because it's when we react, then inevitably we're going to regret it. We're going to say or do something that we're going to then regret.
Yeah.
So it's that presence, that moment of presence that allows us that moment of choice. And the other thing that I thought was great that you were talking about is, what I call spiritual bypassing. It's like not wanting to look at the unpleasant feelings. So, I wrote a piece a few years ago called "You Can't Namaste the Shadow Away." Because there's certain aspects of the yoga community, the spiritual communities that, oh, everything is love and light, everything is love and light, bless you, namaste, and there's maybe ultimate truth to that, but in the day-to-day real life, we can't jump over the negative feelings. We can't just hope that we're going to sweep them under the rug and they're going to go away. They don't. What used to be spiritual teaching, that everything is energy, now we know from quantum physics that it's true. Everything is energy. So even our bodies that feel solid, they're vibration. And we know from physics that energy can't be destroyed. So all those times that we have stuffed our emotions because we were afraid of really saying what we felt, and we didn't want to rock the boat too much, and we didn't want to. We hate conflict. We've been taught and conditioned to run away from the emotions because we've labeled them weakness. And so because of all those reasons, we try to ignore those emotions, all of them, the whole gamut, like you're pointing to. And that stuff just doesn't go away. It only gets worse. It festers under the surface in the tissues of our body. And after a lifetime of doing that, we walk around with layers upon even more layers of repressed emotional crap. And then here we are trying to have a relationship in the present, and all of it is getting filtered through that lifetime of unresolved emotions, unresolved trauma, and repressed emotions. Like, yikes. I don't know how any relationships actually have a chance of working because we haven't been taught how to hold them, how to approach them, and how to frame them. And we haven't been taught how to clear ourselves of that cauldron of repressed emotions that we walk around in and with.
There's so many different ways to bypass and avoid. There's also, just for an example, anger. It's a double-edged sword too, because it can feel really good to let out anger, and some people do it at the wrong time, right? Because repressing it's not the answer, but letting it out is its own challenge too, because sometimes it can feel so good to do that it just keeps reinforcing that behavior, right? Anger, oh, that feels good to let that out, and I just keep doing that, and then it almost can give more incentive to do so. So that's why I like meditation practice, because I can sit on a cushion and just feel the utmost murderous rage if I have it, right? And it's completely safe to do so because I'm, by myself or in an appropriate setting where that comes up to be felt and released, but it's not acted on. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. One of the things when I missed was starting off, I would say to frame your questions, it also depends on the person and kind of the context about what's the best way to teach and talk about integrating presence. So yeah, it depends who we're talking to. Our audience, I think, is a big thing. In what kind of context, there's some folks that we would just want to talk about street smart spirituality with, right? Some
Mm-hmm.
basic practical things that are, apply no matter kind of what areas we are. But then there's other practitioners might need a different approach in this type of thing. And it all depends on if it's formal practice or if it comes off the cushion or off these practices into everyday life. And then I think we might want to mention these in embodied, what did I call it? Yeah, embodied heart-centered awareness. So this is these practices called the Brahma Viharas. There are four flavors of love. I like they're specific, because love, I can love ice cream. I know I say this a lot, but that's not the love I'm talking about. This is loving kindness, compassion, rejoicing, or being happy for other people's happiness, altruistic or vicarious joy, and equanimity. So these are actually, there's formal practices for cultivating these particular heart qualities and then how they interact and which of these we can bring to almost every situation in life. And then it becomes like almost an inbuilt tendency where it's just kind of like a new default and can lead from these places of the heart and embody these as a heart-centered awareness too. So that might be for another time. And the other thing, I'm throwing a
But
lot out
before
here, but
before you move on from that, what I want to highlight about what you said is that
sure.
when you talk about qualities like that loving kindness or
Mhm.
equanimity, that is like, yes, it's work. Yes, it takes practice to get to those places, but it is so worthwhile because that is the peace of mind that all of us are really ultimately wanting and desiring. And that ability to wake up, wake up in the morning or go to bed at night and look in the mirror and be able to smile and not like dart your eyes away. um, I mean, that's good for health. It's good for aging. It keeps us younger. That peace of mind. I call it. I'm from the tropics. I'm from Cuba originally, and then raised in Miami. So hurricanes are a real visual. For us, we've seen them in the weather maps countless times down here. And so for me, that concept of becoming the eye of the storm so that we can allow all the drama that is inevitably going to happen in the world. We can allow people's expectations, their demands, what they want from us, their judgments, all that stuff to float
Mhm.
around us, and we don't have to get sucked into it. That's freedom. That's personal empowerment, and it's priceless.
Yeah, that's equanimity. That's the creme de la creme,
Yeah.
that's the pinnacle of our everyday lives. And, yeah, there's formal practices for it. And a lot of times, once we kind of clear out what's blocking that, these are our natural states, being kind to each other, caring about someone else that's in pain and wanting to do whatever we can to help them. That makes sense, right? And this joy, being happy for other people's happiness. How many billions of people supposedly are on this planet? And so that increases our chances for happiness if I can be happy for them instead of, oh,
Exactly.
why am I not happy? And, there's not enough to go around or this type of thing. And then equanimity, having that grandparently wisdom and balance, knowing that I care deeply, but I can't make someone else's choices for them. They're responsible for their own actions. Yep.
That's right. That's right. And we think, we might think initially that that's selfish, but if we think about it, if we're like somebody's telling us a story about, the argument they had with their partner last night, if we go right in it with them as, oh, how could that bitch say that to you, or that son, that bastard, how could they do that? Then now we're both rolling around in the muck. We've
Exactly.
lost perspective. We've lost really the ability to help them out of that place back into peace and equanimity. So it's actually a service to yes have compassion, yes have empathy always, and maintain our center even for their sake. in
That's
that
right,
moment.
because if we just get dragged down the mud, then it's just two people now in pain and suffering instead of,
Exactly.
it doesn't mean, yeah, it's just like using empathy to connect with how it is, but then realizing that I do what I can without getting dragged into down there with them, because yeah, that's
That's
not
right.
going to help either one of us. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, I just also wanted to plug my breath course recently that I came out with on Insight Tiber, and I'll send you a copy too. It got approved, and it's just a
Nice.
progressive breath awareness course. And these aren't any particular practices, these are just questions I came up with, perceptions on how viewing the breath, and also some practice ideas to consider for folks to roll into their other practices or just deepen what they're already doing too. Um, yeah. So, Christian, what would you like to leave the audience with, and also plug anything you'd like? What kind of projects do you have going on? I think you have a book too. Your coaching sessions and how people can get a hold of you and what you want to draw their attention to.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
That's very generous and very broad question. So let me talk briefly about the book first. Yeah, my most recent book is called Awakening the Soul of Power. So, like I was saying before, most of us have an ambivalent, and I would even say conflicted relationship to power. Part of us wants it, part of us is afraid of it. And I think what we fear is that if we really stepped into all of who we are, into our full on potential, that other people may not be able to handle it. And that we might end up rejected alone. And no, that's no fun. And so I think we also fear that we might abuse it. And no wonder. How many abuses of power have we witnessed and witnessed on a regular basis? And then we've also, on top of that, been conditioned to believe that power is a bad thing. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Who wants to be corrupted? And so what happens when we add to that mix what we were talking about before about the emotions and running away from the emotions is that we end up giving our power away, our innate inherent power that nobody can give to us, that nobody can take away. We give it away. And what I find most tragic is the reasons for which we give it away. So we say yes when inside it's really not okay. Inside it's a no. But in order to appease the situation of the other person, we override our true feelings, our desires, even our dreams sometimes.
And so my Zoom cut off with the free version limited to 40 minutes. And my new challenge as a host is informing the guests of how much time left. So, Christian, you were saying about power.
Yeah, we're talking about how the reasons that we have a conflicted, ambivalent relationship to it, and the result of that is that we give it away. We override our true feelings and desires and preferences and even dreams in order to not rock the boat too much, in order we settle for that illusion of acceptance, for a false sense of security, and we settle for crumbs, for morsels of pseudo love. So because it can't be authentic love if we're not showing up authentically. So what this book is about is how to step into power in a different way, in a way that is not hierarchical, that is not about fear or force or domination, that doesn't require that I push anybody down, step on them in order to feel powerful. How do we do that in a different way? I am starting live retreats again, and my retreats involve breath work, which is one of the areas where you and I connect, and I'm passionate about. And so I do, again, my themes for my retreats are doing relationships consciously, personal empowerment. I work specifically with women around women's empowerment, coming from my belief that that is the single most important thing that happens in the world, that needs to happen in the world. And not to put women up on a pedestal, not to idealize women. Women also abuse power. But it's because as a world, as a species, as humanity, we've been running so off balance, so off kilter between the masculine and the feminine energies that course through all of us because they course through all of creation. And so I'm also, because of the pandemic, like many people, I had to pivot and create virtual online programming. So I've got a year-long coaching program that is incredibly profoundly transformational, where we touch upon all these themes that you and I have been talking about, like understanding the mind and how it sabotages us, and keeps us from having the kind of lives and relationships that we really dream of having, personal empowerment, life purpose. And so, in terms of how to reach me, the book is available wherever books are sold. So you can order it locally at your local bookstore, or you can get it on Amazon or some of those other online websites. In terms of reaching me, probably the best way is my website, soulfulpower.com, SOULFUL power, POWER.com. From there, they can access my social media.
Very good. All right, Christian, thanks for joining me. And it was a pleasure chatting with you. And may you all be blessed with the most optimal and ideal presence and embodied heart centered consciousness.